Welcome to Candidates Night for Readfield. We only have one candidate on the ballot for a town position, and that is Dennis Price for Select Board. Normally, we have more than one candidate, and we hire somebody or actually give them a very small thank you gift for going ahead and being the moderator. And so it was decided that I would just moderate this. I did give Dennis, like we've always done with Select Board and School Board questions and Candidates Night, the questions in advance. These questions are, we're not even going to stick with them or go with them if we have questions from the audience. I will defer always to the audience first. So I'm going to let Dennis Price go ahead and give an opening statement and introduce himself, and then we'll open it to questions. And if there's a pause with no questions, I'll just jump in with one of the 10 that I wrote up. Go ahead, Dennis, please.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you all for tuning in and giving a moment of your time. My name is Dennis Price, and the good news is I am running for re-election. You might not have known that. I live on the Pea Ridge Road in Readfield and have been here since 2010. I love living in Readfield. I learned a lot my first 3 years on the board and am anxious to have another opportunity to continue what I think is a good direction for Readfield.
So I'm just going to go ahead with the very first question just to kind of grease the wheel, if you will, and that is to tell us about what your basic interest is in running at this time. And then please, I'll just recognize anybody who wants to ask a question after that.
Sure.
Go ahead, Dennis.
I would say the biggest reason that I'm running for re-election is because I only just now, after my first term, which is 3 years, feel like I'm starting to have a good grasp on just the scope of the responsibilities of the Select Board. And I have learned a lot with my fellow members, Chris, Bruce, Catherine, Ralph, and someone who took very good care of me in my first year and sort of fostered me through a lot of stuff, and that's John Parent. So I've enjoyed working with this group. I feel like we have made our goals public. We have taken steps to attain those goals. And sometimes I get the unfortunate honor to be a part of an organization, or I have in the past, that talks about goals, that sets goals, but accomplishing the goals always seems like it's going to happen in the future. And so one of the things I really enjoy about this board is that we have goal setting meetings. We publish those for the public, and we try to make sure that we achieve those goals. And so that sense of accomplishment, I think, makes me anxious and excited to do it again for another term.
Great. It looks like we have about a half a dozen people here, so we're going to be pretty informal. If you have a question, just go ahead and ask it. If two people start talking, I'll just try to recognize each of them, but in turn. Who would have a question for Dennis?
Hi, this is Marty Hanisch.
Hi, Marty.
Hi, Dennis. Dennis, what do you see as the town's major challenge in the coming year or 2 years?
Well, Marty, I think it's clearly what's going to happen with COVID-19 and coronavirus. How is that going to play out in our community? That's sort of, to me, I think that's the most pressing thing that unfortunately people want to know, but right now, you know, the best we can do is plan and prepare. So I would say, number one, Marty, that would be it. How that is going to affect then, number two, our most vulnerable folks that before this were, you know, trying their hardest and struggling. Now it seems like that is something that is tenfold. I think that's number two. And number three, how we as sort of leaders of the town and sort of folks that have the ability to navigate these things and how it's going to affect our finances.
Thank you. Somebody else have a question for Dennis? So I'll just alternate going back to the questions I have written. And thank you, Marty, because you knocked out one of them, which is always good. It means my thinking was in the right direction, perhaps. Why should people vote in this upcoming election, Dennis?
Well, I like this question because I think it's going to be an election like one we've never had before. And no matter how people vote, and no matter, what manner that people vote, I think it's really important to vote in this upcoming election. I think the reason is because you see the importance of effective leadership, and I think that leadership is dictated by people voting. You can be as disheartened as you want to be and cynical as you want to be about voting, but ultimately at the end of the day, I take great pride in our voting and our ability to vote and make our voice heard. And I think now, in amidst all of these goings on and crises and emergencies, there's nothing more to me American than having the right to vote. And I hope that people will get out there and vote and be a part of that process.
Another question for Dennis. Okay, I'll just move along. I'm going to skip around a little bit here because some of these are similar. Yes?
Can I ask one?
Please do.
Hey, Dennis, it's Samantha. I'm probably...
Yes, hey, what's up? You're right up the road, yes.
Yeah, a few hundred feet away, maybe.
Yes.
So I think one of the things I've liked in the last few years to see from the select board and the town in general is the kind of growing the types of activities or the attractiveness to younger folks of some of the activities. That's been really good to see. And I'm wondering, in the short run, while we're all unable to gather physically, whether you've started thinking about if there are ways that we can encourage some continued solidarity in town, even though we're not able to do the cool stuff that the select board has been doing to date.
Well, yes, I understand. I think there's a couple things that would probably make up my answer to that, Samantha. Number one, I think we are blessed to have an amazing system of outdoor trails that give us the ability to get outside. So I think, number one, the Readfield Outdoors is a major part of what something I've supported, something I think has a rich history before Dennis Price ever came along. And I just want to make sure, that we continue to do that. And I also think that, as the director and sort of, the leader of our Heritage Day celebration, I don't think we're going to be able to have Heritage Days in the way that we have before. I don't think there's any way that we are going to be able to have that type of gathering. What I have asked Eric to look at and what I want to pursue is the idea of having the fireworks, which I think is a really easy social distancing thing. We could be in cars, we could have our distance do that. I think it would really be unfortunate not to have something like Heritage Days or something like that, but we're trying our hardest to salvage that. In the meantime, I would say the third part of my answer to your question would be there is what I'm sort of calling an infrastructure of empathy in our town that has managed to reach out, organize, and provide help and support to folks during this time who are alone or scared or unsure about what's going to happen in their future. So I think with those three things, Readfield is in a good position to be able to channel our quarantine energy together.
Another question, please, for Dennis. Yes? Okay, great. Dennis, can you go ahead and tell us about any significant goals the select board as a whole ought to consider, or items you would like to see elevated as priorities, perhaps things that the board is not directing now?
Sure. I've thought about this, and I've always sort of been a, I think a lot, active mind, young boy. Are some things. So on the ballot this year are two important issues stated to have on the ballot to give the voice of the people of Readfield opportunity to begin to cultivate one of Readfield's greatest assets, and it is, in fact, I believe, our town beach, one of the greatest. So that is an important thing that is being voted on this year to offer that to residents of Readfield to use the beach freely. So that is something I've been fighting for. And another goal, to sort of speak to the goal-setting mind of our board, is to talk a little bit about the cannabis considerations that are on the warrant this year. I think that it is time for people in Readfield to grow their cannabis, to extend the right that is a law throughout the land. And I think Readfield is a town that I find to be progressive and forward-thinking. I think it's important for us to have those rules in place so that if something, right now we're not quite sure what's happening with retail sales, that's going to be something that will continue to be a question with all of the suspension of activities. But when Readfield can vote on this in July and be ready and be prepared, I think that puts our town in a great position. So those two things I have watched be above what is happening. Two items that I would like to look for in the future, and one I've been thinking about for a long time, and one I just learned about today, yesterday. So I'm going to share the one I've been thinking about a long time. I really like the idea of having the trails in Readfield, and I want to make sure that we continue, if we are able to, with Heritage Days, and continue to do that. And one of the things I'm looking forward to is sort of Heritage Days for next year, and ways that we can celebrate in a way that we sort of may miss out on this year. And so sort of expanding that and doing some things to help celebrate the good parts of our town. I think we have a really great downtown area that I want to continue to sort of have be a piece of that, especially with the renovation of the library and the fire station, which I think is exciting. This is the newest thing that I just thought about yesterday, because one of my friends and Readfield citizens on the Loose Road, hello, she'll never watch this, but her name is Karen, and she mentioned something that was really great, and it was something that I thought about with the rec department, and it was the opportunity to have some public basketball courts be outside somewhere. And I really enjoy that idea, not only because I find that, there is a rich basketball tradition at Maranacook, but I can't believe that there are no courts anywhere outside. I was just aware of that. So it's a project that I think, again, just shows I am committed to investing in our town, and those things, back to speak to Samantha's question, those things draw young people in, and those sorts of things cultivate that culture of, we think Readfield's pretty great and we want you to be outdoors, and that's important.
Next question for Dennis, please. Okay, I'll go to my list. Dennis, we've mentioned coronavirus. It really is an extraordinary time. What priorities do you see as important to consider as we deal with the coronavirus pandemic and its effect on our local and town economy?
Well, here's my unadulterated, honest to goodness Zoom public opinion. We just don't know. We have no way of knowing what ripple will be made in this pond from what happened in March. One thing that I do know is that there are projects that are continuing, there are construction things that are happening, and I feel confident that the work we are doing will continue and be completed. As for new work or how the budget will change, how it is voted, I think it would be foolish for me to pretend like I know because nobody knows. But I think it's reasonable to expect that it's going to have a ripple enough that we are going to see some kind of alteration in what we receive from the state of Maine. I think that would be something we could forecast easily. How much, when, I don't know. But I think what we have now is a budget that I think is currently going out for vote that I think is responsible. And you know, we have plans and we have planned well enough that I feel confident.
Thank you. Another question for Dennis, please, from the floor, if possible.
Eric Dyer here. There was a request that Dennis talk about food sovereignty on the comments section, so I wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Sure. I think food sovereignty is sort of an extension of a lot of what Readfield folks already do. I think there is a pretty rich agrarian background of our town, especially with Heritage Days and being a part of that. And I think it would be, I think the food sovereignty issue that's on the warrant this year simply addresses a way of conducting business in Readfield that shows faith and trust in the practices of farmers and merchants in our town. And that, to me, is the basic bottom line. It's the same as when I go to any store in our area and buy a gallon of milk. I expect that milk to be fresh and free of any kind of contaminant. If it's not, I might bring it up with that establishment and we get the issue solved. I think that's the same thing that will happen with food sovereignty on the ballot this year. It gives, I think, one of my favorite things, it gives the choice to people about where they want it. Plenty of farms in Readfield that already do a great business and are successful. And so why not continue to foster that? Because we've seen certainly in the last couple months, my friend who runs a garden center has watched her sales skyrocket. So I think it's good.
Thank you. Another question for Dennis, please, from the floor. Okay, I'll just fill a void for now. Are there some matters or trends that aren't directly related to governance happening in town or not happening that you'd like to encourage?
Yes, I would say first and foremost, I think I really have to say this as a candidate for a select board having re-election. Working with Eric Dyer is very, very easy and very, very in good faith, I guess. And so, you know, what we always try to do is working with Eric to prioritize the way that we schedule road maintenance. Those practices, I think, are forward-thinking, ways that we take input from our, you know, committees and trusting that the folks who have put the work in can do that. And so I think those are practices we can continue. Practices that help us find alternate energy and sort of efficiency models. I like those things. I still wish that the solar array issue would be feasible. I understand, but I like the way that there are projects to convert the street lamps. Little bits of difference, I think, make a huge sort of ripple like we see and we've talked about before. I really like the investments in our town, the expansion of the fairgrounds parking lot that leads to more people accessing the trails, which leads to more people wanting trails. It's all an investment in making our town sort of great. And to be honest, you see that, I think, in a lot of the home building, the home sales, the home renovations that are not just me, tooting a horn. It's really happening. So I think those things are good for our town. I would like to be able to take a trail from one end of Readfield to the other without ever having to step foot on Route 17.
Got to cross it at some point. So my question too, just to make sure that I have a follow-up on this, was items that were not directly related to governance too. So you did talk about a number of items that were related to governance.
Sure, I'm
Are
sorry.
there some trends and so forth in town that you'd like to encourage or like to see, for example, that aren't related to governance? Just things you would like to encourage and see.
Just play outside, be outside. I've seen a lot of people walking around. I've seen a lot of people on the trails. I love that. I think Readfield has a great outdoor sort of catalog of places you can go by the water, on a trail. And I think it's, those sorts of things I love. So probably that would be it,
Good. Questions from the floor? Okay, we'll go back to our list. Dennis, how could we encourage more people to become involved in town governance? Whether it's, for example, you are very fortunate, I guess, to run alone, but we also have school board positions that are open right now with no one on the ballot. How would we encourage people, not only in elective, but in appointive office, to get more involved in town?
Well, Bruce, I have to tell you, I am of the opinion that running unopposed is not really a great sign of a strong sort of democracy. I wish that people would run. And here's how I think that happens. I think that there has to be a sense, and I'm just going to, like I say, be honest with you. There is a passive activism that happens now that we see on various social media platforms with a curated post or a different link or a scathing article that to me is the essential of a featherish tickle fight. So it has no substance. What I think is real is when you are able to run for an office and show that you care enough about the way your town is organized and run to get your hands dirty and to go to the meetings and to have the Zooms and to put on a shirt and tie and be wearing shorts. You don't know that. Those sorts of things, I think, are the sorts of things that I think people have to sort of understand. It's not hard. When I first ran 3 years ago, people asked me, why do you want to do that? Are you ready? And I've always just been stubborn enough to never let people make my mind up for me. So that continued to motivate me that I was going to find out for myself, that nobody was going to tell me how terrible this job was. I was going to figure out what the job was like on my own. And so what I always tell people, you can ask friends that live in Readfield, I am always encouraging them to get involved, whether it's the budget committee or the rec committee, being involved. And so how do you cultivate that? You tell people that it's worth it. You tell people that it's a lot more active than posting something or having a bumper sticker. And if you want to be able to roll up your sleeves and do something, it's the best way to get involved.
Another question from the floor, please, for Dennis to kind of close us out. Is there someone else who has a question?
Bruce?
I have a question.
Yes.
Well, no, if there's a question, jump in.
Please do.
I just wanted to ask Dennis what he saw coming in the future. What did you see other than the outside, which you'd like to improve, and I appreciate that. That's important. But what else do you see coming that is going to be a challenge other than the COVID-19? We all know that that's going to be a major challenge for the towns. But what do you see coming that you'd like to really dig into?
Well, I mean, I think we certainly have one of the things that I think is kind of exciting and there has been a lot of talk about is our broadband access and that sort of ongoing process. I think one of the things that I would like us to see, a continuation of our partnerships with our towns at the transfer station to continue those operations, making sure that our programs for property tax relief are being utilized and, the money's there and making sure people know about them. Those sorts of things I think are very important, making sure people understand. If you're digging down into some of the core of the municipal issues, I know that we are, sort of looking at our evaluations and things like that. That's something that we've talked about, and things like that. I think one of the biggest things for Readfield is figuring out how we continue to, make the best of all of our property owners, not just folks on the water, but also folks who aren't. So those things, I think.
I just want to say that, I know that you said that that not having anybody run against you isn't it, but part of that isn't necessarily that it's the lack of democracy. I think that when a leader in your community is doing a great job and people appreciate the job you're doing, they don't want to change it. And so that may be why you haven't seen anybody come at you.
Well, I appreciate that very much. It's very flattering, and I appreciate that. And like you said, I hope that's the reason. I don't want to assume that. And I think my thought is just that people this sort of weird, arduous mystique that you have people yelling at you and things like that. I just don't have that experience. And so I'm thankful for that for a number of reasons, mostly the people I've been on the board with. Yeah. So that's made it easy.
I think you've done a great job. I appreciate how hard you're working. I did it myself, so I get it. It's not easy, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and close out this meeting. I just want to recognize that we do have a couple people who are running for state representative. They're both from our town. They happen to be in on this meeting. We're intending to have some sort of additional candidate night to allow that to occur for those positions, and we'll work those details out and let the public know in the future. Dennis, I want to let you have a minute to do a closing remark, and then we're going to move on to the public hearing. All right, thanks, great. Dennis.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bruce. And thank you to everyone who is here. I really appreciate it. I found myself this spring doing an incredible amount of gardening. And I also have a very, perhaps, and I'm not joking, but when I was a kid, it was called hyperactive. I was a hyperactive child. And my mother took great pains to occupy me so that I could channel that energy into other activities. And I found that this spring, it has been gardening. The thing I like about gardening is that there is no app that speeds up the process. No matter how much Miracle-Gro you put on, those plants are going to grow the way that those plants are going to grow, and you can cultivate it and you can help as best you can so that they take root and blossom. I use this metaphor for my time on the select board because I just now feel that I have reached the sort of spring of this time of this responsibility. I feel like I know a little bit and have a good grasp. I feel like the direction that we have been going as a town has been good. There has been agreement. There has been healthy disagreement. But at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that our Readfield will blossom. So I appreciate everyone being here, and I appreciate your trust and your vote, no matter how you cast it on July 14th. Thank you.
Thank you very much.